What's up, everyone? Hope you're having a great day. Don't forget about our 1K giveaway package we're doing on Instagram. Go check it out at All Wrapped Up Podcast to get all the details. On Monday, the 19th at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we'll be choosing the winner live on that feed. So don't miss out. Head over to Instagram at All Wrapped Up Podcast and get in on this giveaway. This podcast episode is sponsored by Rap Life Apparel, a rap-inspired clothing brand. I just got my first batch of shirts the other day from Dusty over at Rap Life, and I gotta say I'm super impressed by the quality of the shirts. Super lightweight, great designs, and the shipping was just unbelievable. Head over to raplife.myshopify.com and use coupon code WRAPPEDUP to save yourself 5% at checkout. And remember, free shipping on orders over $25. Welcome to another episode of All Wrapped Up. Our guest today started pinstriping and sign painting at the age of 14. He's come a long way from the one-person basement shop to a 20-person operation. Helping over 1,000 individuals branding, he's collectively earned over 200 design awards. He's now authored 3 books, with his most recent, Building a Big Small Business Brand. Please welcome Dan Antonelli. What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to All Wrapped Up Podcast. We'll be interviewing industry-leading rap companies to share tips, tricks, stories, and more. All right, cool. So we're going to go live with Dan Antonelli from KickCharge Creative. How are you, Dan?
What's happening, Jeff?
Nothing much. How's your day going today?
Oh, usual frustrations. Clients driving me crazy. Staff driving me crazy. It's all good, though.
Yeah, it's all good. All good. Before we get into it, I'd like to get a little bit of your background, how you got into the industry and how you built this massive agency, advertising agency.
Sure. It's kind of a little strange, I think, how I kind of got here. But originally, I started out as a pinstriper. So I was hand painting, did hand painted pinstripes back in the day. I grew up in Staten Island, New York, and a lot of guys had Monte Carlos, especially, and they wanted to have some pinstripe and put on it. So I would, lay down some stripes, and I would do that with hand painting. And then, often they would ask to have some lettering put on there. The big thing back then for people was to put like their girlfriend's name on the door. So, I did a lot of Marias back in the day on some Monte Carlos and Grand Prix. Lettering kind of evolved from that point, and I started doing some signs. And I was 16 or 17. I saw an ad in the paper for a sign painter at a new sign shop. I had already gone to like every sign shop in Staten Island trying to get a job, and I'd show up there with my portfolio with pictures of some signs and pinstriping, and they all kind of laughed at me and said, you know what, you can't work here. So there was an ad for a sign paint, and I'm like, well, maybe just because they're brand new, maybe someone to sweep the floors would be good enough. So like I went there and I interviewed, I guess, and my interview was actually lettering a sign, and he gave me a bunch of S's and a bunch of O's to hand letter, which are probably the hardest letters of the alphabet. And I must have done okay because he gave me a job, and I would go there after high school and work there, and I worked there throughout college. But really at the time, I thought I wanted to be a sign painter. Period. I was like, I loved everything about lettering, and I loved working on trucks especially, and we did a fair amount of truck lettering there, and the sign painter that I worked with, he taught me so much, and we're still actually really good friends. He came to the opening of our new facility here, which was awesome. I still keep in touch with him after, 25, 30 years.
Wow.
But, so I'm graduating high school, and I'm like, I want to be a sign painter, and my parents are like, yeah, that's not going to happen. You got to go to college, and you got to, do something better than being a sign painter. So I went to University of Scranton. I studied advertising and communications, and while I was at Scranton, I still painted signs and did lettering, and that was kind of my first foray into actually having my own business because the university hired me to paint all the signs for their events.
Wow.
And I'd come home from breaks and I would work at that sign shop on Staten Island. And when I graduated, I got a job right out of school as a typesetter. So that was really kind of enlightening in the sense that here I am thinking I'm this creative guy. I just went to school to learn all this stuff, and now I'm literally typesetting cable TV guides. That was my job for 6 months.
Wow.
And I would, go there, and I despised it, every second of it, and I was miserable. And I started a job for a graphic designer in Manhattan, and I swore I would never work in Manhattan because commuting from Staten Island to Manhattan is like a total train wreck. But I took the job, and then I stayed there for 5 years, and I learned a lot about layout, and I learned a lot about graphic design especially. But I would literally get on the train and read Signcraft magazine, which was like a really important trade magazine. And that's where I would say, well, why aren't I doing this? I really should be doing stuff with lettering and truck lettering, and I missed it. And so I started my business while I was working full time in the city, and I was doing it on the side, and it got to the point where I was working probably, 80, 90 hours a week, easy.
Wow.
And I was doing that for about 6 months, and my wife finally said, hey, you know what? I think you have enough business to quit your day job, so to speak. So I quit that job, and then I worked out of the house for a really long time. My company name at that point was Graphic Designs. It was Graphic D-Signs because I thought it was kind of a cool name because I did graphic design work and then I did sign work. And the whole goal at the time was to try to provide small businesses with a single source that they could get like a lot of things. Because I thought to myself, well, I can't make enough money selling just signs or even just truck lettering. So I started doing things like selling business cards and stationery and then brochures. And, this is in 1997, so the web was just kind of starting to come out, and I started fooling around and selling some websites. And it kind of worked out because now I had guys that needed a whole bunch of stuff from me instead of just needing to get a set of truck doors lettered.
That's incredible. Yeah, working those late hours, I totally understand. Building that business and working out of your garage for a little while to make ends meet.
Yeah, it was, and it was good to do that. And I had a really supportive boss at the time who knew what I was doing, and he was cool with, even once in a while I had to bring a project in and work on it on their time. As long as the work was getting done, they didn't really, care too much.
Right.
So I was really fortunate with that, but you know the deal. You can only do 80, 90-hour weeks for a certain period of time where it really just starts taking its toll. But it's scary. I didn't have a family at the time, and my wife was working and had a good job, so I had health benefits from her. So, a lot of things were lined up to make that choice easier. But I think back to, a couple of years after I'd done that, and my wife was pregnant with twins and couldn't work because she was sick. And, and you're like, you probably don't make the move at that point if you've got, babies on the way and no health insurance and a whole bunch of other things. So, I'm very fortunate, I think, in the timing of how everything really played out to get it to work.
Yeah, building the graphic design business as well. Did you end up having employees once you made that jump at the time?
So I didn't have employees until the year 20, I think, in 2001. So it was about 4 years later that I wound up getting my first employees. And believe it or not, like I had employees actually come into my house and working in my basement, which is absurd when I think about it. But, we were still doing some trucks at the time. I had a Roland Versacam and I was doing vans, and then we were still doing more web and a lot of logos. And logos really started becoming the focal point of what we were doing. And that became like a really critical thing for me is thinking about logos and then how to make logos the foundation of all the work I was doing for these businesses. But yeah, the employees coming to the house, it started getting a little weird. My neighbors were kind of like, what the hell's going on over there? And, I'd pull in police cars into my garage at my house and letter them up and then drive them out of my driveway. And, it's just some crazy stuff.
That's awesome. That's
I
awesome.
look back at it, and I got my first office in 2007, and at that point, I think I had 3 employees. I had 2 that were here, and then I had 1 that left Jersey to move to San Francisco, and she worked for me actually remotely out in San Francisco. But getting that first office, I just remember being like scared to death. I'm like, oh my God, it's like 1,500 a month, and
Yeah.
and I found another guy that did some web development work with us, and his company only had 2 employees, so we wound up splitting the rent.
Oh, that was great.
And we did that for a little while, and then his company grew, and then I had more employees, so I took over the whole space, and he moved next door to a vacant space. And we were there up until 2 months ago or 3 months ago when I built a new office about half a mile away. It's a 5,300 square foot office, and we have 20 employees now. So we were really crammed into like a 2,100 square foot office, or maybe even a little bit less. It was really
That's so
it wasn't it was
you gotta do what you gotta do, right?
yeah. I mean, it took 2 years to build this place, so we didn't expect to really be in there as long as we were, but it just took a really long time to get this place finished the way we wanted. And between the town and the EPA and the DEP and the water company and electric company, it was just a total disaster. But we're in here now, and it's awesome, and we're loving it here.
Yeah, your place is just unbelievable. I remember when you had slowly started to trickle out hints that what you were doing with the rebrand and the new building and everything. And looking at pictures now on like Instagram, social media, it's just a huge custom agency. I mean, everything from like the floors to the walls to your hand painted conference room table that you actually hand painted, right?
Yeah, and that was great to kind of go back to that. I literally hadn't picked up some of those brushes for 20 something years, so it was very cool to kind of come back to where I had started and pick up those brushes again and have a small piece of that history kind of live and breathe now in this new modern space. And the rebrand was something that, listen, the name Graphic Designs, it was okay for what it was when it was, but
Yeah.
it was one of those things where it didn't reflect who we were and the energy that I think we bring to each project. So when I knew we were building a new building, I said, well, I'm not going to put Graphic Designs on that new building. It's going to be a new name. It's going to be a new vision of what this agency is now, and so we really thought long and hard about different names, and I'm sure how hard it is finding names that are available, that you can get the .com for, and all that stuff. And the process took a pretty long time, but once I came up with it and kind of said it out loud and passed it along to a couple of people, like I knew it was us, and I knew that was really the right name to capture, what we do here every day. So it's been great. We've had so much positive reaction to it. Even from existing clients, they're like, we never really liked your name before, but we just love the work you did, so we didn't really care. But I'm like, well, there's a whole bunch of people that maybe don't know who we are, and maybe they're judging us by that name, and I'd rather start the conversation with the right mindset of who we are with those folks. And we just closed like a huge web and SEO project from a company that said they never would have hired us as our previous name, and I'm like, wow, that kind of hurts a little bit, but I'm happy to hear that, because that means that in doing it, it was a worthwhile investment for us.
Yeah. I mean, you had that name for how long? Quite a while.
21 years.
Yeah,
21 years.
And to make that change, I know reading your book and talking about branding and how you kind of want to stick with the name from the get-go, and you really look into the brand from the beginning and how hard it is to, once you kind of build this, you kind of don't want to change it. You want to keep it for a good while to the end. And for you to make this jump almost putting out after putting out this book, I was like, oh man. And he completely did the opposite of what he said in the book, kind of, you know what I mean? As far as changing the name after building such a staple.
It's interesting because, I say in the book that, brands are like a warm blanket. Old brands are like a warm blanket to their owners. And it's true, because you have a lot of people that come here and they say, they want to get a truck wrap. And I'll say, well, if you want to get a truck wrap, we've got to really look at the brand and make sure that the brand will work on that truck. And And then if I find that it doesn't work and I explain that to them, they're like, well, what do you mean my brand's not going to work? Like, I've been using it for 15 years or 20 years. So I had to kind of look at what I was saying to people and say, well, how am I any different than the folks I'm telling the same things to?
Right.
You know, and is this who we are anymore as a company? So you have to kind of be introspective about it, and you've got to you've got to dismiss to a certain extent your nostalgia associated with it, and you got to say, well, is this current brand going to get me to where I want to go, or is it holding me back? And are you only staying with it because it's easy, or changing the name is hard for sure, but what happens on the other side is what makes it all worth it. But a lot of guys get really attached to their current brand. Any measure of success that they have, they sometimes attribute it to that brand, and it's often what I say is success in spite of a poor identity is not a valid reason to perpetuate it. And I had to live that same phrase, and I had to embrace that, and it was scary, and it was worrisome, especially when you consider how much was impacted with SEO and all the things we had to do related to our online presence or to our old brand. So you kind of have to weigh all those things out. But I knew in my heart what the right answer was, and I had a lot of pushback from family and people like that, because they're like, oh, what, you've had it for so long. I'm like, yeah, I've had it for so long, and that's not the reason to keep it. It doesn't. Brand equity is brand equity, and I get it, but if it's stopping you from going to where you need to go, then you've got to really look hard at that, and you've got to make some tough choices. And looking back, it was the best move I ever made. But before I did it, it was a little scary. But it's like when I talk to these guys about changing their logos, I sort of took for granted for years why they sometimes wouldn't be as excited about their new logo as I was. I'd present something, I'm like, this thing's gonna freaking kill it, man. This is gonna be awesome. And then they were like, yeah, okay. And they were like, they didn't get as enthused about it. And I'm like, now I kind of understand to a certain extent why they weren't as excited, because it's traumatic. There's a lot of stuff you got to go through to just change your logo, and it takes time, and it's scary, and I approach it differently a little bit now, having gone through it myself over the last year and a half.
Right.
And I think that perspective has been useful, because I can better appreciate sometimes their perspective and their apprehension, and I've got to kind of shepherd them. I've got to walk them through and say, listen, I know this is scary, but in 6 months you're going to say this is the best thing you ever did, and take this leap with me, and I guarantee you won't be sorry with what we're going to do. And, fortunately, we don't have many people, or any that I can think of, that after we've done what we've got to do for them, that they come back and say, oh, we should have never rebranded. Like, it's never been something that's moved them backwards. It's always propelled them forward.
Tell me about your new facility. How is it set up? Because I know you were talking about how you had, a wide format printer, at your place prior and all that good stuff. What do you guys have set up now?
So I sold my printer in probably 2008, and here's the deal. So, I was doing vinyl lettering for, I guess at that point, probably 5, maybe even 10 years, I guess. And what I found from doing it is, first of all, I sucked at it. So when I see all the crazy stuff that you guys do with these wraps, these color changes, these installs that are just insane, I just can't imagine, the skill that goes into doing that, or I can't imagine it, and it's just mind-blowing. So I realized that I wasn't a great installer, and I also realized that I would do one side of a truck, and that would be fun for me. And then when I got to do the second side of the truck, I was bored to tears, and I had no interest in it. I didn't want to do it, and it was a struggle for me to kind of get past that. And I just kind of started realizing that, the funny thing is I was doing a partial wrap. It would be considered a partial wrap nowadays for this company. And I never forget, the company was called Natural Turf. It was here in New Jersey. And I had done their logo, and I was doing their install at a friend's shop out in Pompton Lakes. And, I don't remember how much we got for the job, but I remember being there for 12 hours, doing this install, and I was just like, this just sucks. This is, and then when I realized how little money I made doing the physical part of it, the actual install, I'm like, I made more money on this design than I did on the installation. So then I just kind of decided, you know what, this the installation and the printing and all that stuff is not what I'm what I want to be doing. I just want to do design work. Right. So I got rid of the printer and I just said I'm going to focus on design only. So we don't do any installs. I don't have any printers or cutters. I miss them once in a while because it'd be cool to just print something out and have something, but I don't have any of that equipment and dealing with any of that stuff anymore. So the office here is just set up. It's half a dozen private offices, and then we have 2 conference rooms that are meant for collaboration with the team and obviously for client meetings. I've got a full-size kitchen with a full, a stove and a kegerator, which every office needs.
Absolutely.
And then we have kind of an open workspace in the middle. So I have design has one set of pods meaning like there's 6 desks in each pod, and I have the writers, the content team. And then I have the developers that do all the coding and the building of the websites. And then the other team is the account team that basically manages all the client relations.
That's awesome. Yeah, so now you've expanded from more of the hand lettering, digital printing, design to more the web design and SEO stuff.
Yeah, I think between logo design and truck wraps, that probably represents, I think it's about 25% of revenue, and then the rest is kind of split between, website, SEO, pay-per-click, and then traditional graphic design services like doing brochures and collateral and that type of stuff. But, the truck wrap design and the logo design work is, continues to increase every year. I was surprised to see how much work we've done, in 2017 when I was going over the numbers. I mean, it just we keep doing more and more of that type of stuff. So a lot of people come in through the front door looking for that type of stuff. And then when we're done with it, then they sign up to do the other things. But the vast majority start out from a brand and truck wrap perspective. And I'd say probably 90% of every logo that we design, truck wrap is going with it. So they basically buy both together, so we can do them at the same time.
Now, do you help find installers after you create the branding for the vehicle and kind of just outsource that to them and let them deal with the installer?
So, I mean, we have a couple of wrap companies that we've worked with in the past. So we give out their names. They have, national installations available. Mm-hmm. And then we also obviously give them the option to just take our files. And if they want to have someone local that they feel confident in doing the job, working with our files and getting them executed. So, the thing for us is, whenever possible, if we have a reference or someone we know that does good work, we obviously, want to try to, push the client in that direction. We've seen a number of installs not get done properly. And, as the varying levels of skills that shops have as it relates to wraps is boggling sometimes. Like right. And some of the stuff I saw our clients get back, I'm like, I feel terrible that's with the job that they got sold. But it's hard from where I sit to pre-qualify every vendor that they're looking at. I just try to say, are they doing wraps once a week? Right. 4 a month, or are they doing wraps, 6 of them a week? That's a totally different shop then, So, things like the certifications, obviously we're trying to look out for, but for the most part, it's hard for us when they don't use one of our vendors. We also want to try to see proofs. We want, the vendors that we typically recommend, they send us proofs simultaneously to the client getting their proofs, so we can look at color together. We can make right. sure that those are the colors we were trying to hit. So, those are the things we've done to try to make sure that everything happens properly. Yeah.
One big thing too is, the difference between a graphic designer and a wrap designer. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
I think it's hard to replicate the experience for a graphic designer that's not familiar with the limitations of the medium. So what looks good on screen may be completely impractical from a production standpoint, and may be impractical from just a legibility standpoint as well. So, I feel fortunate that, from the age of 16 to 22, I guess, or 21, I was physically living on the side of vehicles and hand painting lettering on them, because that perspective has really shaped my philosophy on truck wraps, and certainly my philosophy on branding, because we're approaching everything from the perspective of obviously what that brand signifies to someone, but the key important things are distance legibility and how well the message can be received in a short amount of time. So you look at billboard design and some of those areas to note the limitations of the medium, and I feel like so many of these many of these graphic designers that don't have a lot of experience in wrap design don't understand the limitations of the medium. They're designing as if it's something that's going to be read, viewable from someone the same way a print ad might be viewable to someone, and it's just such a different world. And that's largely why I think so many commercial wraps fail today, because that they don't have the same considerations.
Right.
A lot of needless effects added to things just because they're a key click away, or a background image added just because it's available to use. And you have to really look at those things and say, or do those things enhance the message, or do they take away the message? And if they don't enhance it, then why is it there? So I look at our work, and I think so much of our work is just a matter of distilling how a message is presented into its purest form, instead of just relying on a whole abundance of effects to make up for the fact that maybe the branding is not set up properly, or the design is weak. Just throwing bevels and glows and stuff like that into a wrap design doesn't make it work any better. So when you're hand painting this stuff, you don't have those options, aren't a key click away anyway.
Right.
So you learn to decide whether or not those effects will actually enhance or detract. So that's how we try to tackle it. But definitely, I think if more designers studied outdoor advertising and understood and looked at it from that perspective, that they would tackle wrap design a little bit differently and try to think of how few things can I add to this truck wrap to make it effective, instead of how many things can I add to it.
Yeah, I definitely see that in your design concepts and wraps, that you kind of bring the old style of hand painting and just bringing it into the digital world, how simple it is, whether it's like an inside not a bevel, but like a hard bevel. You kind of bring those little shadows in, and just like real subtle drop shadows, nothing crazy. It's just, it almost looks like it's hand painted, and your style of your brand, in general, you guys really specifically like create these iconic designs, bringing it back to retro designs and having mascots. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of work and detail you guys put into your work for these things.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, our workflow is everything is vector-based, so we don't do anything at all in Photoshop. I think maybe the last few hundred wraps, maybe only one that I can think of has been done in Photoshop.
Wow.
So, we're always thinking about it from that perspective too, where it's hard, not that it's hard to add bevels and stuff like that in Illustrator, but, it doesn't add much to the brand in doing so. So again, just trying to distill into its purest form. So yeah, we'll have a drop shadow on something, but it'll be, a layer that's set to multiply at 10% black, and that's the extent of it. Stuff like that is what we're really trying to do. If we're trying to pull something to the foreground, that's fine. But very rarely. Sometimes we'll use a bitmap effect in Illustrator, like a drop shadow or something like that, but not often. I mean, glows are probably the thing I abhor the most when I see it. Stuff like that. It's just you wouldn't do that if you were hand lettering it. So I try to sometimes think about it from that perspective too.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about your book a little bit, your newest book, because you've written 3 total. Building a Big Small Business Brand. Such a great book. I mean, you give so many secrets out in how to build a brand from scratch. And you get a lot of testimonials, and you talk about, how you started and how you get the finished result and go through colors and samples and stuff like that. And I really like you have a little small section of vehicle wraps, which is great information. And you talk about how 3 to 4 requirements you should basically only have on a commercial wrap, which would be strong brand, tagline, and website and phone number. Real simple. No laundry list, as you would call it, of services, which I'll attest to doing that due to a client needing it. But on your designs, it's just so simple and clean, and there's not too much clutter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I see stuff like Facebook icons on truck wraps or QR codes and Instagram logos, and it just blows me away because I don't understand why we have that stuff on there. Those stuff aren't enhancing the brand that that's on that truck. So we're all about really just trying to approach it purely from a 100% brand perspective. So the point of the book, and really why I wrote the book, is the idea that most small businesses really have a poor brand. So what would happen to your brand if and you're a small business if you had a great brand? How much disruption would you cause to your marketplace if your brand was one of the ones out of, let's say, 20 that stands out?
Right.
So we really look at it from that perspective, and I think I say in the book maybe 90 to 95% of every small business has a poor brand,
Mm-hmm.
and I stand by that. I really do, and I think that's what's so awesome about the opportunities that a business has when they embrace the power of a great brand. What would happen if you were the 1 out of 20? Like, well, what do you think is going to happen? People are going to notice you. They're going to see your truck. And they're also going to have established in their mind a brand promise as to what does this business signify to me. I don't know anything at all about this company except this van that I see driving through my neighborhood. So what's the impression that van gives off? So if I can control that first impression and I can dictate to that consumer what they think they're going to get before that company even rings the doorbell, then I've done my job.
Right.
So we have a lot of companies that have a great service. They just don't look like they have a great service. So what would happen if you married up the perception with the reality? And that's where I think we see guys killing it. I mean, the truck wraps with the branding coupled with the rest of the marketing, these guys go out there and they're crushing. I mean, I got one guy that we started with him, is $8 million company. He's out in Vegas. And after we were finished doing the rebrand, 3 years later, $40 million.
Wow.
Now you want to tell me that brand wasn't a good investment and one of the smartest things that they ever did? Of course it was, and he'll tell you so. He tells me I undercharged him too, which doesn't make me feel any better. But
yeah, you never want to hear that.
But that's what happens when you embrace how important that brand is to ROI, not just on your truck, but everywhere. It's like you want to build a generic website and pop a crappy logo on there. Well, we could drive traffic to that website. Maybe it'll convert. But what would happen if you had a branded website with a killer logo on there that spoke to a positive brand promise? What would happen? So that's the part too where I think people just don't understand how critical that logo is. I mean, the logo is kind of like the hub for everything that you're going to do. So if you don't get that logo right, then how is the truck going to look good? How is the uniforms for the guys going to look good? Like, none of that stuff's going to work unless you get that first piece right. And that's why it's so critical.
Right. And I love in the book, which has opened up my eyes tremendously, was that when you have a client come in and you're rebranding, you actually look at the demographic, who they catering to, Miss Jones or commercial, and you build that brand on what the demographic is about, as well as you kind of do your homework on people that are in the same industry that surround that specific person, which I don't think a lot of people take that in perspective and maybe lose out, because I've seen plenty of brands, for instance, an HVAC guy, you're going to have that swoop of red and that little swoop of blue on every HVAC guy's, truck. Well, what makes them not look like Joe down the street that does HVAC? Nothing. So you flipping their branding, whether changing their colors, changing their colors to something completely different that someone else hasn't used, now you're putting them on the map because now visually it's something different and they're going to have to read it. And I love that you dive deep into that because that really opened up my eyes as a graphic designer and a wrap designer and installer that, a lot of people should be doing that.
Yeah, and that's part of our process on the onset is to, ask those questions, ask who they're selling to, ask what they want to represent in a brand, like what do they want to be perceived as, and then obviously doing research in the market as far as what are the brands that they compete against and what are their color schemes especially.
Right.
So, it's funny, we go through this often where, we come up with something and the colors are more disruptive in nature. They're colors you haven't seen before 1,000 times. Like, so we do a lot of heating and air companies and they're like, oh, blue and red. I'm like, yeah, blue and red, just like everybody else.
Right.
You want to look like everybody else or you want to look like you can own that particular brand. So, we're always, again, like you said, thinking about disruption. So if that van's coming at me down the road and it's purple and teal, well, you know what? I don't know too many HVACs that use purple and teal. So why not try to own that particular brand instead of being safe about it and looking like every other brand? Like, I don't know why you would want to look like everybody else that's out there. And even if your previous brand used those colors, you still didn't own it.
Right.
One of our most successful HVAC brands out in North Carolina uses purple and gray,
mm-hmm.
and it's hugely successful. He's the only purple contractor out there. I mean, it's not like the whole truck is purple, but it's done in a way that's very professional. Actually, it's in the book. That company, Blanton's Heating and Air, great company. And he said when he hired us that he saw a sea of white vans, and he realized he was one of those white vans. And he said, it's time for us to look different in the marketplace. So the research is important. The other point I want to make is when you talk about who you're designing for. So you're talking about designing for the demographics that you're selling to. And you've also got to deal with the fact that sometimes you have an owner whose personal taste affect
mm-hmm.
their vision of their own brand.
Right.
So, I try not to be like flippant about it when I talk to a client, but I'm not designing for them. I'm not really trying to make them happy. I'm trying to make the people he's selling to happy. So, within reason, of course, I want them to love their logo, but my number one goal is for the people you're selling to love your logo. I guarantee you after they love it, you'll love it when you see the results. But, I try to approach it from that perspective. What is the person you sell to every day? What do they want to see? Forget about what you want to see, because what you want to see, you're not the person I'm trying to sell to.
Right. Yeah, it's all about ROI. You know what I mean? You look at it completely different. And I think, we talked a little bit off air, but about your book and how people may not pick it up or read it, or a lot of people aren't reading now. I think this book for our industry, like I said on my post, it's like the Bible. For sure, 100%. I mean, if you're in the rap industry or commercial rap industry or even a graphic designer, this book is going to open up your eyes 100%. It's going to make you look at things in a different perspective from someone who's been doing it for over 25 years and has gone through the experience and has gone through things that you might be going through now. This is like the show notes here. This is the cheap book. You know what I mean? And we've never really had that before. There's no one ever coming out and saying, listen, this is how you should do it, and this book tells you. Yeah. And I wrote it for designers as well as business owners because I wanted them to understand the potential of what happens with a good brand. But, I like to think that as an agency here, on one hand, we say we're not curing cancer, and that's sort of a thing that we say here, to try to keep it light and lively. But on the other hand, everyone here recognizes that the work that we do is impacting lives. So, we think, the idea of designing as if lives are at stake is really, an important philosophy to really recognize. So, anyone that's taking a small business and branding them on the side of a van and doing their truck wrap has to understand the impact of their work and how it affects the lives of the people employed by that company.
And I think that's the one thing I lament sometimes is I feel like that's not taken enough into consideration. Like, understanding how critical of a role you are playing in the success of that business that has hired you to take on that task. And, I think it's something that's so, it's so critical to understand. And, not every job requires you to think about it like that. If you're doing a couple of simple commercial signs or something, like, I get it. But on the other hand, when it comes to this type of stuff, when you're building a brand for a business, you better act like your lives are at stake, because they really are. I know what happens on the other side of this when it's done right.
Right.
I know how many jobs get created. I mean, for 8 million to 40 million, how many jobs do you think were created? Not 100% as a result of our work, but certainly we played a pretty significant role in that. So what if I just looked at that like it was just another truck wrap, and I can't look at any job or any logo as if it's just another logo or truck wrap. I mean, I've done 1,000 brands in the last 20 years, wow. And each one of them is significantly important to me because I know how important it is to that client. So I just wish more designers valued that philosophy, because it's just really important what they do, and with the work that they put out there for that client.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've reached out and you kind of work with some people in the industry. I know I talked to Trish Dill from We Print Wraps. You guys do some branding for them for vehicle wraps as well. Do you work with any other outside companies that are in the industry to help brand or help them design wraps?
Yeah, I mean we've done it both ways. Certainly we've worked with a number of sign companies and helped brand them themselves, and lend support in that endeavor. And then from a design perspective, sometimes they'll have the right type of client come in that is really looking to take their business to the next level, needs not only just a truck wrap, but is really looking to create a brand and have that brand implemented on different mediums. And some shops are honest with that client about their capabilities, right. And they'll say, this is a little out of our league here, what you want, but, here's an agency that we work with, that can help you with the design. And then of course we want to handle the print and install for you. And that, works out, I think, best for all parties. In those instances, they don't even really try to act as a middleman. They just send the lead over to us, and then we deal directly with the client through the design process. And then when we're done, they get the files and they get the print. So in some respects, some of the shops that aren't well suited for design and are better suited for print and install, it works out better because they're doing what they're good at while we're doing what we're good at. At
this point now, do you think you've reached a pinnacle in your career?
So I think certainly when I started, I used to think that there was, and I don't believe that anymore. I don't think that there is a pinnacle, because if you believe that there's a pinnacle, that means that there's nowhere else to go but down after you reach it. And I think when I was first getting into business and I would see guys in magazines and that kind of stuff, I used to think, wow, those guys are the best, and that's the best they'll ever be. And then you come to realize that if that's the case, then there's nowhere to go but down once you reach there. So I just kind of refuse to accept the notion that there's a pinnacle, because that'll mean that my best days are behind me, and I don't want to choose to believe that.
Right. Yeah. And I it's funny because now my last interview with Kevin Kempf, which is he's won a bunch of awards in the rap industry, and we kind of dove a little bit into that conversation, how every year now moving forward that he has to one up what he did last year. You got a whole year to plan something, and you get there and then you may not win,
yeah.
And then kind of be like, well, now what? Did I do my best? Did I not do my best?
And I think that's I can't wait to listen to that, because that's really a truth, So I have days here where we do something and I think it's the absolute best thing we've ever done, and it's exciting and it's fun. But then I'm like, shit. Now we got to do.
There's always tomorrow.
Now we got to do better. Now I got to do something that blows this away. And where am I going to come up with the inspiration to do that? How am I going to make that happen? And we continue to do it, but that's what's hard. That makes
Right.
what we do hard because you're constantly trying to innovate. You're constantly trying to be different. And you're constantly trying to re-examine your work to see ways in which you can improve it. And therefore, there isn't a second where you can kind of rest on your laurels and say, you know what, I'm at the top of my game and I'm not going to get any better.
Yeah. I mean, I thought the same thing as well back when I had a little, I think it was like an 800 square foot shop, and I'm making these small signs and lettering cars in this garage that I could only do one side at a time because the garage was literally the size of a car. And, to have some type of publication come out with your name on it and a little bit of a spread about your business and how you started. And I thought that was going to be my peak.
Right.
That was
right.
my high. And then, a few months went by, you don't get any recognition for that. Nobody calls you and say, oh, I read that article.
Right.
I love your work. Some guys might say, I've talked to a couple guys, they're like, oh, I saw your cover thing on Suncraft. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. And, you get that instant high and you're like, wow, kind of feel like celebrity. But then if you don't have anything after that, it's like, okay, where have I gone? And where do I go from here?
Yeah. So it was funny, like the last 2 months, we've been on the front cover of 2 different magazines. We were on the front cover of Plumbing and Mechanical for one of the jobs we did, a truck wrap design we did. And then I was on the cover for Signcraft. And I'm like thinking to myself, yeah, anytime you get that recognition, it's like, yeah, that's cool. And it's cool for the moment.
Right.
But you look at it and you have that pressure as far as, well, what do I need to do now to get the next cover? And where is the next cover going to come from? So you have that constant, idea that what we're doing today isn't good enough for tomorrow. And if you think it's good enough for tomorrow, then that's the exact point in which you flatline. Okay, so it's funny. There's this song that I listen to, and I'm going to probably date myself with some of the younger guys, but I love the band Rush, and there's a song called "Losing It," and one of the lines in the song says, "Sadder still to watch it die than never to have known it," and that those words mean so much to me because that's someone that's reflecting back on where they used to be and how good they used to be. The whole song is about a writer who was really good at writing, and then over the years he just kind of lost it, and then a dancer who's really good at dancing, and then she kind of lost her abilities, and she reflects back, and that's where the line comes. And I look at that and I say, well, that's unacceptable to me. I can't be at a point where we're the best we're ever going to be. That would just feel horrible. And I think you see businesses the same way. As they look at their brand, they're complacent because they feel like they're in a good spot. Well, you know what? Complacency is only going to get you, incremental to where you want to go. It's those aren't, that's not going to get you to the top as fast as someone who's more aggressive and doesn't accept the fact that they're good enough today and that's going to be good enough for tomorrow. So, definitely looking at it from that perspective, we look at anything that we do here as an agency that it's not good enough for tomorrow. I constantly preach that here. We constantly talk about it. We constantly look at what's going around the corner and what's coming up and how we need as a company to be better prepared for it. So, thinking about those lines and accepting the fact that there isn't any pinnacle for us to reach, it's just always trying to do better than we were the day before is really how we try to push ourselves.
That's a great piece of advice. I love that. Yeah, you never want to flat line and you never want to get comfortable. I think that's a little bit of it too, is being comfortable in what you're doing and just kind of just riding the wave. You never want to ride the wave.
Yeah.
You got to smash through it and keep doing better. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. And not only that, just like you said, it's also looking at what you're doing today and asking yourself, is the way in which you're doing something today the right way to do it? Like, just because it had been working isn't the rationale to say that that's what's going to work in the future. So, even when it comes to wrap design now there's, how many different ways can you possibly design a commercial wrap? Well, that's what we're trying to look at. Just because I don't want to be formulaic in how I design a truck wrap because I know it's worked for one. I don't want to assume it's going to work the same exact way for others. I'm not just looking to swap elements with different mascots and logos. So, that becomes really difficult too because you think, okay, after a few hundred commercial truck wrap designs, how different can you really get with it? And that's hard. It's hard to look at it, and it's very easy to fall into a trap and say, well, I'm just going to kind of recycle a concept I've used before, but it's not fair to that new brand, and it's not fair to the brand you used it on previously. So that's what's hard about trying to stay on top of that.
Right. Yeah. When you've done so many, like you've said, you get into a groove of just doing the same cookie cutter designs, and you definitely don't want to fall into that gap, because then you never grow and you never challenge yourself. Let me ask you a few more questions before we wrap it up. You just kind of like a fire questions at you, and just get your answers. Would you have done anything different up until now to get to where you are? Yeah, that's a real good one. I actually heard somebody ask this question, and I was like, wow, if I was asked that question, I would be a little stumped. But I thought it was such a great question, because, I mean, you've been through a lot in the last 25 years between building a brand, sticking with that brand, rebranding, building a newer, bigger agency. What would you have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, just seeing the results of the rebrand, I really wish I had done it a lot sooner. Certainly, that would be one thing that I would point out and say that I wish I had, really given that more thought. As I started getting more and more employees, it was definitely something that was brought to my attention by them. And even from my own perspective, like I'm not sure I ever really felt proud to say I was the president and creative director of graphic design. Because you say graphic design, and you're like, what? What is graphic?
Yeah.
No. What does that mean? Is it design? I probably wish I had done that a bit sooner, because I think we would have been further along at this stage if I had.
What is your favorite font?
Damn, how'd you find all these questions to ask me?
Oh man, it's just one of those things that come to me.
I mean, I feel like I've been beating the hell out of Gotham for a while, as is everyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, Gotham is our corporate typeface. Or actually, It's Proxima Nova, but sometimes I cheat and use Gotham, and these guys don't know it. But yeah, I mean, Gotham is very versatile. I mean, I think I look at fonts that have the many varying weights. Termina is also another one, Termina. It's a wide face sans serif. It's got different weights. And I've been using that on a lot of secondary copy for a bunch of logos, even primary copy. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't give you a straight answer. I gave you a bunch. So
cool. What's your favorite color?
Favorite color? I don't know. I'm living the world of yellows right now. I'm in my office.
Yellow.
I got two gray walls and two yellow walls. So I'm gonna say yellow right now.
All right, perfect. And favorite program to use? Graphically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm all in Illustrator.
All Illustrator.
Yeah, I mean, I use Photoshop when we have to do mock-ups of how the designs look on a truck. But everything I do is in Illustrator, and I'm only in Illustrator probably 4 or 5 years. I used to use a program called Freehand, which is probably dating myself, but Freehand was the equivalent of Illustrator back in the day, and then it was run by a company called Macromedia, and then Adobe bought out Macromedia and killed Freehand. So then I had to learn Freehand, and I learned Illustrator, and I kind of did it begrudgingly, and I hated it for a long time, and now it's all right, I guess.
That's awesome. And I got one more for you.
Yeah.
What's 2018 bring for KickCharge?
I think that we're doing a lot more in the digital space. So the biggest areas of growth that we've seen has been related to digital marketing. So web design, SEO, and pay-per-click. The branding in the truck wraps has remained consistent and is growing, but not at the pace that those other areas are growing. So we're hiring more people to support that. So I would think, by the end of this year, I'll probably have another, hopefully another 3-4 employees, probably more so in the content marketing and the copywriters and the writing side of things, and maybe another designer as well. So, I'm hoping to see a bit more growth this year. We have the space to house a lot more people, which I wanted to obviously plan for. So, it's exciting. We've had a lot more opportunities to even have more meetings and stuff and have more local clients. The crazy thing about our business is that we have all these clients, they're all over the globe. We probably only have 5 to 10% of revenue coming from the state of New Jersey.
Wow.
It's nicer now to encourage more client meetings and have them come out here, because then when they come here and they see the space and they meet the team, there isn't a lot of design agencies that have a space like we have. So it really helps set the tone of what we can do for them when they visit here. So that's been certainly exciting to see.
That's great. Dan, let everybody know where they can find you social media wise, email address, websites, and all that good stuff.
Well, our website address is KickCharge.com, and our Instagram is KickCharge Creative, and my Instagram is Dan Antonelli _KickCharge. What else am I missing? Facebook, we're on just as KickCharge Creative. We're on Twitter too as KickCharge Creative on Twitter, and I think I'm just Dan _Antonelli on Twitter.
Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on and to talk about branding and how important it is to have a good brand prior to even wrapping your car, and the tips to having a great design for the vehicle wrap industry.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, buddy.
I want to thank Dan for taking the time out of his day to talk to us for a little bit on the podcast. This episode is sponsored by The Wrap Promoter, featuring wraps, graphics, designs, and tools from around the world. To see more, follow at The Wrap Promoter on Instagram and Facebook. For features and advertising, email wrap.promoter@mail.com. I want to take a second to thank all my listeners and supporters, as well as sponsors of the podcast. I really appreciate all your support. And if you could, please share, like, and subscribe this podcast if you like what you're hearing. It really helps us out ranking on iTunes. And don't forget, we are also on Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and now on YouTube. Please go to our YouTube page at All Wrapped Up Podcast and subscribe to that. We'll be posting some videos soon. Till next time, that's a wrap.